This Jean Monnet Lecture is organized in cooperation between Jean Monnet Centers of Excellence in Maastricht and Manchester. And today we have a very special guest, a Czech diplomat and a politician, Štefan Füle. Mr. Füle served as an ambassador of Czech Republic to NATO, Lithuania, UK. He also held positions in Czech government. And in 2010-2014, he was EU Commissioner for Enlargement and European Neighbourhood Policy. Currently, he is an advisor to the President of Uzbekistan. And Mr. Füle will give a short lecture on the topic, the European Union's foreign actorness in its neighborhood, perceptions and reality. And after this, everybody will have a chance to ask the questions. So you can write them in Q&A, yes, not in chat, but in Q&A. So please write them down and we will try to answer them. So Mr. Füle, welcome. We are very happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much, and many thanks for the invitation. I have to admit that I would prefer much more to be with you in Maastricht and have a personal contact and seeing the faces sort of behind that screen, the screen. But this is the best we can come up with. So let's try to do it in a most proper way. I have also to admit one more thing, that Alina was kind enough to put my picture in the poster, where I looked much younger than I am. So Alina, next time, please. And the last comment at the beginning, let's agree on one thing. This is not a kind of fact-finding mission, okay? I'm not trying to substitute internet you have on your split screen where you could check all the facts and all of that. Huh? That's not necessarily what I expect supposed to do. I'd like to give you my impression about what has happened, at what time and why. And let's see whether we'll be able to do the proper job. Let me start with the first remark. The first remark, apantarhei, everything is changing. And there is only one organization in the globe which actually is changing by its own definition, and it is the European Union. It has been said a couple of times to me that it's like riding the bicycle. I mean, once you stop riding, I mean, you fall. So when you stop reforming, changing the European Union, that's going to be the end of the European Union. And I sympathize with that. I do, because what we are doing with the European Union project is something completely new. There is no book on it, may only book what has happened, but not really an example to follow from the history of the mankind. And the best we can do is to change the institution, to be able to work in the ideal conditions we can imagine. And the biggest job we have is to adjust that ideal conditions do not exist even in the physics, not to mention our world. So it's each and every crisis, every challenge to turn into a possibility to make us stronger, more effective organization. Now, there have been a number of important changes with the Lisbon Treaty. Actually, the Lisbon Treaty and my government is responsible for second Barroso team to be the only commission not to serve 5 full years, because President Klaus at that time has held up the ratification process in the Czech Republic, the Lisbon Treaty, challenging the ratification in the Constitutional Court. So we have not started in 9 in November, but February 2010, as Alina said at the beginning. But the changes which Lisbon has brought were tremendous, and I have come exactly at the time when actually what later on became an External Action Service was a DG Relax, which I was for 1 year in charge of. We have the start of the External Action Service. We have, for the first time, the High Representative was also the Vice President of the Commission. We have ended the practice of rotating presidency role on the issues of the foreign policies. We have subsequently also changed the practice that every 6 months you have in capitals of our partners and allies a different member states presiding over the EU agenda in relations to that country, including, of course, in our close neighborhood. And that has changed. We have created the EU embassies and staffed them also appropriately. So a lot of positive changes, but at the same time, 2 important constraints. The first important constraint was parallelism. We have created the kind of EU foreign policy, but at the same time, it was up to the member states, of course, to pursue their own bilateral, multilateral policies. So we have had and still have 2 policies at the same time. I mean, the EU and the member states. And I cannot say that the situation today is better, but at the time when I was in the Commission, I sometimes said that we do not, with the External Action Service and the changes to Lisbon, we do not have, and at that time the UK was the member states and Croatia was not. So we had 27 member states, and I said, instead of having one coherent policy, we have not 27, we have not one, but we have 28. We have 27 policies of the member states plus the one of the EU. And another constraint was unanimity. That despite the efforts of my successors, you still have the issues in relation to the foreign security, to the foreign relations, to the foreign policy, to the security and defense. The decisions are taken on the basis of unanimity. That, of course, creates difficulties, particularly vis-a-vis our neighborhood. But turning to neighborhood, let me give you, because that policy has changed, I mean, as institutional framework of the European Union has changed, so has changed our policy. I'll give you just an headlines. It's 2004 neighborhood policy. We would come back to that. The headline was, let's create a circle of friends. 2010, that was already, I had my fingers in that. There was a policy more for more and optimistic, and policy of many people saying optimistic transformative commitments. I have to say I'm still a supporter of that rather than of other policies I'm going to mention. Then in 2016, successor of Cathy Ashton came out with the following headlines: resilience and our interests are important, and let's turn to geopolitics. That was very much a headline of the strategic paper in 2016. And what can I say about 2020? It's stability written all over the room, and that's what we are seeking and not only in our neighborhood, but there are some changes, so we will come back to that. By the way, one of the change, let me mention right now, this is the European Union Strategic Compass. This is something what the defense ministers are debating, the foreign ministers, what should be some practical roadmap, I mean, how to build on what we already have, this European security and defense. And we could come back to the relationship to NATO later on if you are interested through the Q&A. Now, before we move to various kinds of neighborhood, let me mention the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership of 1995, which precedes the neighborhood policy, which I already mentioned in 2000, being adopted in 2004. But let me mention one important element. You know, why neighborhood policy at that time, 2004? If you look at the calendar, what has happened also at that time, you will realize that 10 new members arrived to Brussels, to the EU institutions, and so on. And at that time, Prodi, the president of the Commission, was very keen not to move the hard border between the EU and the new members which were there before we joined to the east borders of the new members. So from the very beginning of us joining the European Union, and I was happy to be one of those from the new member states, Commission at that time has made sure that the new neighbors of the European Union have in their hands quite an ambitious policy. They could choose and negotiate with the European Union to match their ambitions. Now, let me turn to the southern neighborhood, because that has been probably the biggest wake-up call for me and my colleagues when I was in the Commission. Those 28 days at the end of 2010, at the beginning of 2011, has shaken not only the world, but first of most, our institutions. And frankly speaking, my most difficult moment when I was commissioner was my first trip to Tunisia after the events, and getting the questions, where have you been? Where have you been all those years? Where we, I mean, the civil society, were striving for the very, very values you are saying you defend. Where was your lighthouse? What has happened? I mean, how dare, you know, that you worked with, you know, dictators? Those were extremely difficult, actually, very easy questions, but it was not easy to answer them. But I think we took the lessons. I have to say, just as a small defense, that at the time, as I said at the beginning, or indicated at the beginning, the policy was very much in the hands of the member states rather than institutions. We did not have External Action Service at that time and so on. So there were some trade-offs which were made at the bilateral basis between the member states and the regimes, and not only in Tunisia. And my priority, together with Cathy Ashton, was, you know, to make the dramatic shift and to turn the External Action Service indeed in the most important transformative instrument. We have come out in an extremely short period of the time, taking into account the experience in the European Union with the Spring Programme to support the changes, and not only in Tunisia at the beginning of 2011. We have come out with a privileged partnership based on an upgraded action plans. We have started to negotiating the DCFTA, which is a deep and comprehensive free trade agreement. You will hear about it later on. We have come out with a mobility partnership, which was adopted on the bilateral basis rather between a number of the member states and Tunisia and some other countries. Talking about money, and that's probably the least what was on the mind of those who protested, but was still important because we made specifically an extra efforts that all those money, every euro, would be to assist them to change the situation on the ground. In the years 2014, 2020, Tunisia alone has been receiving around 115 million euros a year. And those are not loans. Union for Mediterranean, that was another important institutional framework for regional cooperation. So 15 countries of the region and 27 member states, kind of trade off when the French president pushed this idea of Union for Mediterranean, and the Sweden, Poland, and to a certain extent the Czech Republic pushed for the Eastern Partnership. I'll come back to that. The Union for Mediterranean was at the beginning on the co-chaired basis, one member of the European Union and a member from the region. But it later on, we succeeded the European Union, its new institutions, and the potential we have built concerning the human resources, financial resources, ability to pursue structural dialogue. We have succeeded the member states on that rotating presidency. Now, if you compare this situation with today, you have, of course, to ask what has paid off, what has not, whether we have done everything possible. I think one thing you might say quite clearly is that democratization, and Tunisia was not the only example, has brought also a lot of instability in the country, and sometimes, unfortunately, also in the region. And I will come back to that when I will be talking about the Eastern Partnership. But it was so special moment to allow for synergies and complementarity between the European Union on one side and its partners in the neighborhood. And I'm, despite certain setbacks, and I think I'm on the record to say it a couple of times, we have never made promises that the transformation would be quick, without challenges, and only peaceful. But I'm still optimist when it comes that once you open this, once you open the opportunities, once you give the people the possibility not only to dream about their future, but also to do something, the people will not let anyone to take it from them, whatever the challenges and difficulties they face. Now, that brings me to the Eastern neighborhood and Eastern Partnership, which started more or less as this Union for Mediterranean. There, the situation was a little bit different, because at that time, when I joined the European Commission, we have already started negotiating really a far-reaching agreements of new generation. It's called association agreements and deep and comprehensive free trade area. The point of this DCFTA in particular was to bring our Eastern partners as close to the European Union as possible, to involve them and bringing them as a part of our common market, on the conditions we negotiate with each and every partners when it comes to the level of ambitions and the speed with which they would take on themselves a number of important commitments. You know the story. We started the negotiations with 5 of them. Belarus was out from the very beginning. And we have finished the negotiations with only 4 of them. Actually, 3 of them, because the 4th one, Armenia, has the foreign minister called me in summer 2003, saying that he needs to talk to me very urgently. And then he told me the whole story about them in a couple of days going to Moscow to sign, of course, on the basis of free will, to sign a memorandum on Armenia joining, at that time, still the customs union, which then evolved in the Eurasian Economic Union. This is, by the way, interesting issue. If someone is interested in it, put it in a chat and a Q&A, and I will come back to that. We have felt that something might be coming, but it was not clear at that time what it will be. Because interestingly enough, and that is not, unfortunately, a matter of common knowledge, because that reference has disappeared from Kremlin web. President Putin, when he visited Ukraine, and kill me, I don't remember now the year, but it was already at the time we have been in the middle of negotiations of the association agreement and DCFTA with Ukraine. And he got the questions from the journalists about the possible of the Ukrainian membership in the European Union. And he answered in an interesting way. He said, listen, if anyone would be interested in Ukraine becoming the EU member states, I mean, taking into account that, we have a very close contacts, relationship and cooperation, particularly with the east of Ukraine, it might happen to be a positive also for us. What I'm trying to say, at that time, everyone knew about the Russian position on the NATO expansion. And those of us sitting in Bucharest summit of NATO which for the first time adopted a resolution in which it promised actually membership to Ukraine and Georgia. Some of you might remember, or you might get across in your research, this communique from Bucharest summit makes it clear that Ukraine and Georgia will become the NATO member state. Now, the next day we had a NATO-Russia Council with Putin, and he was reading his statement, and then he mentioned Ukraine, and he stopped, he looked at us and said, are you really interested in having this artificial country, Ukraine, to become a member state of NATO? I have to tell you honestly that half of us laughed because they didn't know, I mean, they thought it was a good joke. And the second half did not understand the message at all. And only a couple of months after the Bucharest summit, you know what has happened in Georgia. Putin already at that time has learned that we were bluffing big way. By the way, this membership issue, if you look at the NATO and the European Union, so the NATO, as we just talked about, it has promised, you know, you will get this light at the end of the tunnel. But at the same time, in Bucharest summit, they refused to adopt the membership action plan. So they did not tell the Ukraine and Georgia how to get there, to that light. We in the European Union made the same mistakes, although, you know, on a completely opposite argument, because through the association agreement and DCFTA, we actually have given our Eastern partners the best possible recipe how to not only get closer to the European Union, but how to actually become eligible for membership in the European Union. So we gave them this way, but we told them, don't touch the light. We will not give you this light at the end of the tunnel, and we will never, in any of the documents, and some member states were really very insisting, they very insisted on it. They never allowed any reference for some eventuality of the EU membership for some of those Eastern countries who would have this ambition. So, and I'm afraid that we paying the price for our lack of consistency here. What we facing today. Now we made three mistakes, I think, when it comes to the Ukraine and the rest of the Eastern partners. If you look at Eastern Partnership and Russia, we had at that time a very consensual and ambitious policy vis-a-vis our Eastern partners, but we have no consistent and no ambitious policy, and there was no consensus on any policy on Russia. You remember when a couple of minutes ago I was talking about Prodi and about neighborhood policy, why it was so important at the time of enlargement, you know, when we moving the borders towards the east, we immediately sort of put in front of our East partners some kind of ambitious program, agenda for interaction. We did not do that at that time. We just moved this ambitious consensual policy to the Ukraine, Russia, Moldova, Russia borders, and let it up to our partners to figure it out, what to do with that. The second mistake was that at the time before Vilnius summit, we have focused so much on particularly Ukraine to fulfill what I at that time have interpreted, put as a 9 conditions for us to sign the association agreement with them, that we have forgotten that some of our member states might not be that enthusiastic about the association agreement and the DCFTA. By the way, one of the irony was that at the Vilnius summit itself, I was still trying with the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister to move the things forward. An interesting thing is, at that time, the Ukrainian government had credentials to sign the agreement, because they adopted it a couple of weeks ago and no one has repealed that decision of the government. But the European Union, which was saying, I mean, we are interested, we have not approved this. I mean, the people were ready. I mean, to be fair, the people were ready in Brussels, you know, on the call, you know, to meet in a respective format, to make a formal decision. But an interesting thing was the Ukrainian government, who had actually all the credentials to sign it, refused to do it. And us, who did not have at that time any paper to sign it, we actually were the one who said, we're ready. But there are more than this one irony when it comes to the foreign policy, the EU, and a neighborhood. Now, enlargement. That's a third type of our neighborhood. And let me say at the very beginning what I'm actually put on my notes as a last point. The enlargement, without any doubt, is the most transformative and most powerful transformative instrument we have. There is nothing more powerful than the enlargement. You cannot do with 3 armies what I can do with 35 chapters of the European Union acquis and a couple of years transforming the country. And it's so sad to see actually the only new member states joining the European Union when I was the commissioner, no further enlargement. It's so sad to see that that the door, despite the political rhetoric, are tightly closed. It's sad, but we would come to that. We have been working with and my successors with not only individual candidate countries and aspirants, but also as a region as a whole. We have come out with the regional format of 6. We have persuaded, despite some initial objections and me being accused in media of 1 or 2 enlargement countries of trying to resurrect the former Yugoslavia. We try to persuade the countries, listen, work together, the 6 of us. The more you work together, the easier job you will have to join the European Union, the easier job we all will have to persuade the member states. And why to wait? That was the first reason. The second reason, why to wait with some informal, some important projects like transport and energy infrastructure, making it to reach out the Western Balkan countries even before they joined the European Union. And for that, we needed those 6 countries working together, so 6 candidate and aspirant countries. We needed particularly the European financial institutions and also some international financial institutions to agree with our financial plan and new innovative way of financing the things. And we came out with a package of billions of euros to help them to address this infrastructure issues. The Berlin process itself, very good idea of Chancellor Merkel. We just helped to feed the content into it. There was exactly this regional approach to the infrastructure, the transport and energy, enlargement money, regular assessment of progress in enlargement. Show me another case in the world where we in Brussels have on a regular basis the most detailed, and I would even say delicate, report of how the country, including Turkey, Serbia and Kosovo, are doing when it comes on fulfilling the conditions for joining the European Union. So that is another extremely important and powerful instrument. And you can imagine how stressful it was, not only for me and my team, but also my successor, each and every time, I mean, to put together as objective X-ray of the candidate and of the candidate countries and aspirant countries. Intergovernmental conferences, I already mentioned the 35 chapters. The more we open those chapters with those we currently negotiate, and if we opened the negotiating process with others, the bigger we have again the influence and the transformative influence in those countries. Conditionality, Serbia and Kosovo, enhancing the dialogue between them. I'll leave it also for the Q&A if anyone interested. And there is one thing I need to share with you, what we cannot do, because otherwise the sky is limit. Actually, the consensus is limit. Oh, we might say money is the limit, but you can do a lot. But there is one thing where I was unable to move the things. My successors are in the same position, and it is if a member state raise some bilateral issues vis-a-vis the candidate country and insist that this issue needs to be solved, of course, fairly, objectively, before this chapters opens, the negotiations open, or before this candidate becomes the member state, there's nothing you can do about it. And I had a lot of discussion with Croatia at the time they were joining the European Union. I was even the last minutes, I just think some language, some kind of declaration on their side that once being a part of the EU, they will be conducive to the enlargement process in the region, and not to put a prospect of any Western Balkan countries as a hostage of some open ballot issues. And unfortunately, that has not happened as I imagine. Now, Do we have UK and online also? Yeah, Brexit. Brexit is important. It's not important that it happened at the time, and it's not important because the European Union has lost 16% of its economy. It's important because of the two things. We lost one of the most powerful foreign and security player in the globe, and of course in our neighborhood. And second, and even more important, because I've always been respecting the will and the decision made particularly by the people, like the one they have shown during this referendum. But I have this issue with this Brexit. It's not about the UK, it's about us. Because what Prime Minister David Cameron at that time has been able to negotiate with the European Commission, which negotiated on behalf of all the EU member states, was a paper, informal paper, to meet actually all the difficulties of the UK to the point that the European Union would accept that the euro is not the only currency, that that there are some limitations to the freedom of movement. There were some issues which really were fundamentally challenging the pillars of the European Union. I'm not sure, it would work, but I'm saying that was the best chance we had. If this being, if there is a positive vote, and if David Cameron that would insist, and now I want, this paper to be implemented, this would be the best opportunity for us to make a stop, looking around at that crossroad and choosing which of the road we would like to go when it comes to the future of the European Union. And I was very sad when I particularly compared this Cameron paper and Bratislava Declaration. Slovakia was at that time presiding over the European Council. And the meeting of the heads of states took place in Bratislava, and they reacted through this Bratislava Declaration on the results of the Brexit. And if you read those two documents, those are two different organizations, those are two different roads, those are two different perspectives of the European Union. Brits leaving the European Union took away from us this opportunity to make a stop. That's what I have problem with. Otherwise, good luck. And being privileged to serve there as an ambassador, I know that you will be doing very, very well. Now, listen, I have put forward here, or put among my notes, the resume of instruments, but I think you got by now already an idea about all these instruments. So I will skip it. I will just mention something what I put as point number 8, current trends. And this is interesting because we have two processes. We have the Conference on the Future of Europe, which should be addressing a number of those issues I've been referring to. But unfortunately, it's not touching upon the most important one, because for the enlargement to move, the European Union needs to move. Because I think it's clear to anyone by now that for the enlargement to happen, it's not only about the candidate countries to be ready, it's also about the European Union to be ready. And it seems to me that, I don't know whether most or whether a smaller part of the European Union, they are not ready. And they are saying it very, very openly. We will not move unless, you know, there are some other changes within the European Union, institutional and so on, for us to be able to, you know, to be still efficient organizations with the new members. I mean, I would say that show me the case of the 10 member states really blocking or making it difficult for the European Union to move forward. We are a good scapegoat for a number of older and bigger member states, but we hardly have been blocking some progress here. But this conference is not addressing those issues. Missed opportunity. But at the same time, we are being pushed by, you know, our environment to change ourselves. Green recovery, fit for 55, you know, that's one thing. The second thing is, you know, we, thanks God, have still consider ourselves to be a beacon of hope for those who are not lucky enough to enjoy all those fundamental freedoms and for the parts of particularly the Europe, but also beyond the words of human rights are sort of some kind of expression in dictionary, but nothing they can enjoy. And it's interesting that as I'm now working with the Uzbek president, as people coming to me and say, you know, Štefan, this enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement, it says something about the human rights here, but it has to be about trade, no? And I said, good morning, you know, the world is changing, guys, you know. Yeah, but here, you know, this environment, you know, and what has to do? Everything. It has to do everything with the trade. So we came to the point where we started to understand that what's really made us so not only big, but also prosperous was our ability to make a free trade, to trade fairly with the rest of the world. And now with China and its Belt and Road initiatives, taking this basis for fairness from our partners. And I mean, if there is one thing I have been extremely enthusiastic about hearing news from the Brussels, it was about this gateway, global gateway initiative. This part of what the US, actually the whole G7 would call the Build Back Better world. We have finally woken up. We have finally understood that this Belt and Road initiative, it's not only about hardware. It's not about exporting the hardware. Actually, the Chinese foreign minister was so open in the connectivity summit I participated in Tashkent in the summer this year, when he said in the plenary, he said, you know, for the China, the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, is not only exporting the hardware, but it's also exporting software. Oh my God. Yes, yes. We have not seen it for years. Huh? Even the Russians who made a deal with the Chinese, I mean, to support, you know, Belt and Road initiatives, were telling me in Tashkent during this conference, oh gosh, we leave it up to you. Huh? We cannot do anything about it. Huh? We have not seen this coming. But they realize that that's what the Chinese are doing. They are coming with their own software. They are coming with their own rules, their own principles. They are coming with the things which transform the fair trade into something completely different. And I think these kind of things are going to change us. I'm talking about is going to change our partnership. It's going to change our neighborhood. It's clear to me that, particularly seeing those recent initiatives, that the mood is switching from sort of the European Union behind the fences, despite what's going on the Polish, Belarusian borders. But it's rather understanding that that you might not call it anymore a transformative power, but you might call it building the alliances to support a global governance and different rule-based cooperative structures. And our existence and our future is very much linked to that. Listen, I have a couple of other points, but the time is running out. I would like just to make one or two sentences at the end.
We also have some questions, some very interesting questions.
Very good. In so-called nation first world, there is no future for the European Union, and member states would be paying heavy price. And we must adjust to a multipolar world with authoritarian regimes and with power politics to be able, particularly in our neighborhood, to enjoy the results of the transformative power of our policies. So thank you very much for those who still are linked to this debate, to this lecture. And now I'm also looking some of the questions. So
you have already 10 questions, and you can choose. There is a question about the refugee crisis in Poland, Hungary, and about Ukraine. There is one question which is particularly interesting for me. What would you do differently in 2013, knowing what would happen with Ukraine?
I don't see any. Here, you Q&A. Okay, very good. Good evening. I have a question regarding the current crisis at the border between Poland and Hungary, with millions of refugees living in human conditions. The US already announced further sanctions on Hungary. In your opinion, will this threat to be enough to contain Hungary's behavior? Okay, I don't understand. I mean, how the situation, the between the border between Poland and Hungary.
Well, perhaps we can rephrase that, Stefan, by perhaps bringing in what you just mentioned about Eastern new member states not having caused particular blockages in the EU decision making. Could perhaps immigration be considered one of them?
Look, there are two issues I would like to say in this regard. The first one, I have a certain sympathy how the Poles, Lithuanians, and Estonians perceive the current crisis, because this is the way how you weaponize the migrants. I mean, thanks God, because of the EU policy, the flights with the Turkish Airlines, the Belarusian aviation company, bringing particularly the migrants to cross the border to the European Union have stopped. Thanks God, at least half of those people, hundreds and hundreds, have been already sent back, particularly to Iraq. But there is a plight of around 1,000, including the children, which is, of course, a matter of concern. You know, the one thing we have somewhere probably lost, we are somewhere missed to understand. While the military, the weaponry, the hardware is still important, the conflict, the competition, the war could be waged by a different means with a much more devastated impact without even declaring an open conflict to a country. And I have no doubt that this is a part of that Lukashenko is playing the dangerous game. And I know a little bit a guy, I met him, I talked to him. But I talked to him at the time when there was still a chance that the part of him being Belarusians would mean not to get closer to the Moscow and become a more and more European country. Now, after what has happened in Belarus, I mean, what remains as my sort of hopes are not there anymore. Now, the new members, old members. I am extremely concerned about this issue. It's not that I like what's going on in Hungary and how Orban is building his illiberal democracy. This is definitely not something we would like to see in my country, and definitely not something what should be incorporated into the European Union acquis. But at the same time, I think what is missing on the part of the older member states, a certain humble understanding of this terrible experience of the new members living under the totalitarian regime. You know, 40 years is enough to ripe your soul of your body. And all the time, the Western democracies were addressing, you know, one problem after another problem. In a democratic or within the democratic discussion, with the democratic parties, you know, moving it forward, with the civil society addressing those issues. We have not. We have not. And just by adopting the European Union acquis, we are somehow expected, you know, all that 40 years of the older member states' experience to
You're muted. You should unmute.
I'm not anymore. I don't see you anymore.
We can see you.
So I see both of us, are responsible for current situation, both of us. And I don't see, how this current tactics by the institutions and by the Polish authorities, how they could sort of bring us closer to the solution. I just one thing, because it's important to understand. In the Czech Republic, actually Czechoslovakia, because Slovakia went through the same process, we were still one country. After '89, there was a called lustration law, purification law. And on the basis of that law, the judges, the politicians, the people working in the public service and security service, they could not have studied in the past in certain Russian schools, or they could not be active colleague of the state secret service and all of that. And all of that was checked in archives and so on. So the whole society, and particularly the people on the top, they were screened. Not in Poland. Not in Poland, because, there was another transformation. We still had a communist party at that time, even after '89. In Poland, the Communist Party has transformed into a one left party. And the lustration has been a very vague process, actually never being done in a scale and magnitude and depth as in Czechoslovakia. So addressing those issues after 20, 30 years might be too late. But maybe it is important to address some of those issues. Maybe there might be some understanding from the West. But I'm far from, again, sort of joining the illiberal democracy-like attitude of Orban. Okay, another question.
I have here one that might be interesting, is from Christoph Meyer. Do you agree with the criticism that the EU, prior to Russia's aggression against Ukraine in 2014, suffered from geopolitical blindness? If so, what do you think is needed for the EU to see better geopolitical risks and manage them better?
No, we did not. We did not. Look, you have to read not only one or two books, you have to read a little bit more books and see sort of and open up your mind, to other issues. My country, after '89, we wanted to become the EU and NATO member. You know what the Russians told us? And we had at the time the Russians military on our territory. They told us never. You should not become NATO member states. And we were saying, how come? We are a sovereign country. It's our decision. No third country is going to decide what kind of friends we would like, to have, what kind of commitments we would enter with other institutions. So as the Warsaw Pact has been actually dissolved in Prague, the political decision has been taken in Prague, we made it very clear in our policy and trumpeted very loudly for no one in the West to side with the Russians, that it is our sovereign right to choose what kind of security arrangements we would like to have. Now, if I accept this as a right for the Czechs, why should be the one to tell the other country, just because it's a little bit closer to Moscow, that, they do not have that right as me? Why? that's my first part of reply. My second, I have given you an example in my lecture that actually everyone knew about Russian attitudes towards NATO, but no one really was aware that they would take the European Union membership even more aggressively. We visited the European Commission, was the last time in Moscow was March 2013, and I was there. I had a discussion with a Russian vice minister, I don't know whether it was Kozakov, day before the meeting with the Russian government, because it was on the every second year we had the meeting either in Brussels or Moscow, Russian government and Commission, and every 6 months at that time there was a summit, EU-Russia summit, as some of you might remember. And I understood that the Russians are starting to have, that was for the first time, starting to have really a big problem with the Eastern Partnership and the Association Agreement and DCFTA. Next morning, I told Barroso, President Barroso, and my colleagues, listen, there's something cooking up. We need really to raise this issue. And Barroso asked me to make it on behalf of the whole Commission. And at that time, I made basically 3 points. The point number one was, listen, your customs union and our association agreements and DCFTA are not compatible when it comes to the membership. Meaning you can be either member of this or member of that, okay? And it's not of a political nature, the reasons, it's a legal nature, because the customs union has been built on the basis of the experience of the European Union with the customs union commission taking over a number of the external policies responsibility from the member states. So if we allow the Ukraine to become the customs union member states, or if they would, it's not about us allowing anyone to become member of this or that, but if Ukraine would become the member of the customs union and now Eurasian Economic Union, and we would come out, yeah, but we have a deal, and you know, please deliver on this, on that. The Kiev would tell us, yeah, you have to go to Moscow, because it's them who are in charge of that part of our economic sovereignty. Second, despite the point number one, we told, and Medvedev was prime minister at the time, we still want our partners to have as good relationship with Russia as we aspire to have, taking into account all the culture, traditions, you know, political, economic, and all of that. Absolutely. To the point that if the partner would like to join this or that policy of the customs union or Eurasian Economic Union, we would be helpful in looking whether this or that policy is not in contradiction to the responsibilities undertaken by our partners through the association agreement, DCFTA. And if not, we would support this wholeheartedly. And third point we made was, let's not forget the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the relationship between the European Union and Eurasian Economic Union, future Eurasian Economic Union. Because as the things are, there were at that time, each of the organization was following and building its own regulatory framework. And we made the point, if that continues, if we do not make an effort to make it compatible, we will be stuck with dividing line of economic and trade nature, which might be even more important than the number of the tanks on this or that part of the border. And Medvedev looked at us. He said, "Oh, very interesting." He paused for like 2 or 3 seconds, and they said, "The next point on our agenda is they have never come back." Do I think that if something would change if we raise this issue earlier? Hardly. Hardly. But at that time, even the Russians didn't know how far they would be able to come to get what they were supposed was theirs, Crimea.
Can we just perhaps looking at some of the other questions and jump in here for a minute? If I may ask a question that I very often ask my own students here in Manchester. It's a golden opportunity, a dream question for me to ask you. Where do you think the external border of the European Union ought to be? Where does Europe end?
Europe ends where exactly at the point where the interests of those coming in and the consensus of those who are already in collides together. This is exactly the border.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, because if we agree that Tunisia is a European member state, there is a consensus. And if the Tunisia wants to become the European Union, I'm just pushing this argument a little bit. Okay, don't jump out of. I'm addressing now those whom I do not see. But that's the best answer I could give you, particularly after the Georgian experience. You would not believe that just because of being afraid that Georgia might, in the future, to be more and more vocal when it comes to the membership aspirations, one member state in particular has blocked a reference to Georgia as a European state in the agreement between the European Union and Georgia. Because the Lisbon Treaty talks about the European state, that you have to be a European state. It is exactly as I said. If all the member states agree that Georgia is a member state, is a European state, and if we all agree that it fulfills all the conditions, if the Georgians would say, yeah, this is our ambitions, and would prove in a popular vote that this is indeed a long-term policy of theirs.
But is there one country in the world where all 27 members of the European Union agree that they are European, and that country also agreeing that they want to be part of the EU? Or is enlargement done?
I mean, look, at this point of the time, the European Union cannot agree even on the Western Balkans. Okay. As sad as that. Huh?
Okay, I'm just looking at the time. Mr. Füle, do you want, is there in this row of question, the question that you would still really
I still have the time.
That you would like to answer?
Yeah.
I'd also, or we have one question which is from our colleague Assem Dandashli. How does the democratic backsliding in some EU member states affect the transformative power of the EU in the neighborhood, especially when it comes to democracy support and promotion?
Listen, non-diplomatic answer would be taking into account that the European Union currently does not really have high aspirations to exercise its transformative power in this neighborhood. The impact is only limited. But if this continues for a longer period of time, and if the EU would re-energize the enlargement, particularly the enlargement policy, that might be a problem. Because already at the time of the second Barroso team I was part of, this issue has been already on the table. Not particularly I mean, even Hungary already at the time, but not only. And we, with Commissioner Reding, came out because we both understand, I mean, how dangerous it is to have sort of the two ways how to measure the commitments to the values. I mean, once you are outside and you try to get in, and once you are inside, we just you know, close at least one eye, if not both of them. And she came out with this idea of a board where would you list all those important commitments from the Lisbon Treaty and so on. And I think it's evolved to a certain extent. I don't think it does delivers on the original expectations of her mind, a number of the member states who pushed us actually to do something like that. Yeah, but that's a fair point. I mean, once we are not able to make sure that the values are respected and rules apply to all of us, I mean, how come we could be strong enough and credible enough to expect our partners to do exactly that?
Alina, you still spot a question.
I mean, there are 12 questions, so if you can stay for a few hours, there is still something to answer. But
Just
and
pick one more.
I would like to remind that there will be also this interview from.
Yes, but one more question, please, Alina. You must have spotted a one that you prefer, because Dimitris picked one, I picked two. Which one would you like?
Yeah, I like the one which you asked partly, but I could continue. What would you do differently in fall 2013 if you knew how the situation between Russia and Kiev developed?
Nothing.
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 So there was
under the circumstances, with the knowledge and instruments I had in my possession, I would act exactly in the same way.
Okay.
Yeah. The lessons learned when I was referring to the three mistakes, I raised them with one of my last meetings with the foreign ministers of the European Union. As a variable, I shared with them sort of these lessons learned of us failing in Ukraine, although the history has not been yet completely written about this issue. I think the biggest problem was indeed the one which I mentioned as the second lessons learned, that if you have a very ambitious agenda towards one partner who is in a complicated relationship with another bigger partner, and you don't have any ambitious agenda, consensual, strong policy towards this, you are aiming at difficulties. Well, like this one, Konstantin Achilles, he wrote, wow, could you please share with us thoughts and reactions, Macron's proposition radically overhaul the enlargement process? This is just taking time. I mean, this is like, with all due respect, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there is so much what has been done with enlargement. I mean, I was doing this when I was commissioner to please the member states. There is one thing, and it's coming back to Brexit. I liked very much the British idea about the European Union of various orbits. I started to question the mandate of the Commission, and it was only after I left the Commission, to be able to prepare the candidate like the countries from the Western Balkans, to be really able to deliver on all the obligations and to fulfill all the expectations of not only the institutions, but all member states since the first day they become the member states. And I was, and that happened when I was still a commissioner. Towards the end of my mandate, I was talking more and more about the EU going through a certain transformation to ensure that those member states which have difficulties to imagine how the EU would work, that those sort of worries are taken care of. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. So you know, and it's a pity. Huh? I mean, look, there was one thing I was extremely proud, and this is what made what has made the European Union really great. When we promised something, we delivered on our promise. When we promised that the country, candidate country A, fulfills this and that, we move them on the stairs of the enlargement process. We always delivered, and that was this conditionality, which worked. And has been broken. It's a broken machine now. Huh? The Macedonia was changed name. We promised the membership, and look how long it's still open issue. Huh? So it's bad. That's exactly what's making the Chinese and Russians so relaxed in that region, because they feel that it's not the same game, huh, as they have seen, huh, in Central Europe, and this is something we all be paying the price for sooner or later. So I don't see, how those two particular countries would make this region more stable and more EU-friendly.
I think that's a very good point for us all to reflect, and thank the former commissioner for what I thought was an absolutely marvelous presentation, very far reaching. I feel I've learned a lot of food of thought. So very best regards from Manchester. Thanks for coming, and I'll pass you over to my colleagues in Maastricht.
Also
okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Also from our side, Mr. Füle, it was such a great honor and pleasure to have you with us. I think what I enjoyed most was also to hear from, not from our books, something that our books can never tell us is, the experience, also what happened, on the working floor. And I think this is a perspective that very often we miss, and that I think we very much benefit from, and we greatly appreciate that you came, and answered our questions also today. So that was fantastic. So thank you so much, also on behalf of the team in Maastricht, that you joined us this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for making me happy to talk about these things. I was so enthusiastic at that time in particular, and I'm still a fan of it even nowadays. Thank you very much. All the best.
Over
Thank
to
you for
Alina for the
our audience.
concluding.
Thank you. And Mr. Füle, I'm leaving you with Charel and the students for further questions.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you, the audience. Goodbye.
Thanks. All the best.